On my wedding day, my mother-in-law stormed into my room holding a contract and said, "Sign this, or the wedding is off." Before I could react, my fiancé Lucas grabbed the paper, ripped it to pieces, and handed her a different folder. Her face went pale when she saw it. I always knew Lucas's mom was controlling, but I never expected something like this. I had spent months planning this day, making sure everything was perfect. Lucas and I had been together for 6 years, and I thought I was prepared for his mother's behavior. I was wrong. The day started out fine, the guests were arriving, and I was in the bridal suite with my maid of honor, fixing my veil. Then, Lucas's mom barged in, wearing an over-the-top blue dress and holding a folder and a pen. Without even saying hello, she shoved the folder at me and demanded, "Sign this, or there won't be a wedding." I was speechless. My maid of honor looked just as shocked. I finally managed to ask, "What is this?" "A prenuptial agreement," she said. "It's to protect my son. Sign it now, or there's no wedding." I wasn't against the idea of a prenup, but Lucas and I had never even talked about it, and the fact that she was throwing this at me on my wedding day made me feel sick. I opened the folder and started reading. The contract was ridiculous. It basically said if we divorced, I'd get nothing. It also had crazy rules like, all the money I made would be controlled by Lucas's family. His mom could visit whenever she wanted, and if Lucas wanted a divorce, I'd have to leave the house immediately with only what I came with. I couldn't believe what I was reading. "You can't be serious," I said. She was dead serious. "Sign it." Right then, Lucas walked in and saw the folder. His face turned red as he read through the pages. Without hesitating, he ripped the contract into pieces. His mom looked like he'd just set the church on fire. "Lucas, what are you doing?" "I'm not marrying a contract, Mom, I'm marrying her," he said and then looked at me. "I'm so sorry." His mom was furious. "If she doesn't sign, there's no wedding." That's when Lucas surprised us both. He pulled out his own folder from his jacket and handed it to his mother. "Then here's a contract for you." She opened the folder, her face turning pale as she read through it. Her hands shook, and she looked up at him, scared. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. Lucas crossed his arms. "That doesn't matter. What matters is if you don't leave this room and let us get married, I'll make everything in those documents public." I had never seen her look so terrified. Without another word, she clutched the folder, turned around, and left. I turned to Lucas, still in shock. "What did you give her?" He sighed. "Leverage." My maid of honor let out a nervous laugh. "Well, that was dramatic." Dramatic didn't even begin to cover it. Right before we walked down the aisle, I asked him, "What was in that folder?" Lucas looked at me and said, "Everything she never wanted anyone to know." And that was just the beginning. I should have known it wasn't over. The ceremony went as planned. We said our vows, exchanged rings, and for a short, happy moment, I thought we had won. Lucas had stood up to his mom, she had backed off, and we were finally married. But the moment we walked into the reception, I knew something was wrong. She was still there, sitting at the front table like she owned the place, holding a glass of champagne and staring right at us. I squeezed Lucas's hand. "Why is she still here?" I whispered. Lucas let out a frustrated sigh. She wasn't invited to the reception. But there she was anyway. I tried to ignore her and enjoy the celebration, greeting guests and smiling, but deep down I knew she wasn't done, and I was right. The first problem seemed small. When dinner was served, the plates of food were completely different from what we had ordered months ago. Lucas and I exchanged confused looks. I asked our wedding planner, "What happened to the filet mignon and salmon?" She looked terrified. I don't know, let me check." A few minutes later, she came back, looking like she wanted to disappear. "The caterer said the groom's mother made last-minute changes this morning. She told them she was in charge." Lucas slammed his fork down. "Of course she did." I took a deep breath and told myself it was just food. We could deal with that. But then came the speech. My maid of honor gave a beautiful, emotional toast that made me tear up. Lucas's best man gave a funny and heartfelt speech. But before the DJ could continue, Lucas's mom grabbed the microphone. "Oh." The room went silent. She put on a fake sweet smile and said, "Well, since I'm the mother of the groom, I think I should say a few words." Lucas muttered, "Sit down, Mom." She ignored him. Then she started her speech, and it was awful. She spent the first couple of minutes talking about how Lucas was so successful and had so many options that she never thought he'd settle down. Then she looked straight at me. But I guess some women know how to be persistent. Some people chuckled awkwardly, not realizing it was an insult. I clenched my fists under the table. And then she dropped the real bomb. When Lucas first told me about the engagement, I was shocked. Marriage is a big commitment, and some people rush into it without thinking. She stared right at me, so, like any loving mother, I tried to protect him, but he made his choice. She sighed dramatically. All I can do now is pray it was the right one. Silence. Absolute silence. Lucas shot up from his chair so fast it made a loud scraping noise. That's enough. She looked at him with fake innocence. Oh, honey, I was just joking. He grabbed the microphone from her. We talked about this. You weren't even supposed to be here. She gasped. Are you saying I'm not welcome at my own son's wedding? That's exactly what I'm saying, Lucas said firmly. His mother acted shocked, pressing her hand to her chest like he had hurt her feelings, but Lucas wasn't falling for it. Go home, Mom, now. She glared at me before storming out. I thought that was the end of it, but it was just the beginning. Lucas and I went on our honeymoon, and it was perfect. We ignored his mother and focused on each other for 10 peaceful days, but when we came home, everything blew up. We walked into our apartment to find half of our stuff missing, furniture, electronics, personal items, gone. At first, I thought we had been robbed. Then I saw the note on the kitchen counter. Since you refused to sign a fair contract, I am simply ensuring my son is protected. He will thank me later, your mother-in-law. I was so angry I felt like I was going to pass out. Lucas was furious. He called her right away. The second she picked up, he yelled, "What the hell did you do?" Calm down, dear. I simply took what was rightfully his. You stole from us? I protected you, she said like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. Lucas hung up on her and called the police, but because his mother had a key to the apartment, one she had from before we moved in, it was considered a civil matter, not a break-in. I was shaking with rage. She had planned this and knew exactly what she was doing, but she didn't know we were ready for her. Remember that folder Lucas gave her on our wedding day? The one that made her go pale? It had all the dirty secrets we'd found, financial fraud, tax evasion, secret accounts she had hidden from Lucas's dad, and worst of all, evidence she forged Lucas's signature on a loan she took out in his name. We had been holding on to that information for months, waiting for the right moment, and she had just handed it to us on a silver platter. Lucas gave her one last chance. Return everything you stole, apologize, and stay out of our lives, or I turn everything over to the authorities. She laughed. You wouldn't dare. Lucas's response? Watch me. And then he did. Lucas went straight to the authorities and reported everything, fraud, tax evasion, and the forged loan. We expected his mother to panic and try to negotiate, but instead, she vanished. Lucas's calls went straight to voicemail. She didn't respond to texts or emails. It was like she had disappeared. A week later, Lucas's dad called us. He sounded nervous and desperate. I need to see you, now. We met him at a diner. He slid a folder across the table, his hands shaking. You need to see this. Lucas opened it, and his face went pale. It was full of documents showing bank withdrawals, asset transfers, and property sales. His mother had drained everything. She emptied accounts, sold off assets, and ran. She took everything, his father said, his voice trembling. She left a note saying she's starting fresh. She knew she was caught. Instead of facing the consequences, she ran. At first, it seemed like she was just avoiding punishment, but then things got worse. Someone called my workplace, spreading lies about me. Lucas's job got an anonymous tip accusing him of embezzlement, completely false. Packages started arriving at our apartment filled with weird, disgusting things, expired food, old shoes, even a box of dead flowers. She was out for revenge. One night, Lucas and I came home late. As soon as we walked in, something felt wrong. The air smelled different, but everything looked normal. Until I walked into our bedroom and saw the note on my pillow. I will always be one step ahead of you. I screamed. Lucas ran in, saw the note, and searched the apartment. The locks weren't broken, the windows were shut, but she had been inside. That's when we realized she still had a key. We changed the locks the next morning, installed security cameras, and filed a police report, but again, because nothing was stolen or broken, there wasn't much they could do. If she wanted a war, we were done playing defense. Lucas and I spent weeks searching through everything, bank records, property sales, anything that might show where his mother had gone. One night, we found it. She had bought a small house in another state under a fake name. She thought she was safe, but she made one mistake. She used Lucas's stolen identity to get part of the money. That was all we needed. We called the authorities in that state and handed over everything, fraud, fake identity, all of it, and then, we waited. A month later, Lucas got the call during dinner. His mother had been arrested at her new house. She never saw it coming. The woman who always controlled everyone and everything was finally powerless. She called Lucas from jail, crying, "How could you do this to your own mother?" Lucas's response? "I'm just protecting myself. Isn't that what you always wanted?" And then he hung up. Even after she was arrested, I couldn't relax. Lucas's mother had always been the kind of person who thought the rules didn't apply to her. I kept waiting for her to find a way out of this mess. But this time, she went too far, and there were too many people making sure she faced the consequences. Lucas and I went to all her court hearings. She looked weak and miserable, like she wanted everyone to feel sorry for her. Her fancy clothes were gone, and her hair was messy and dull, but her eyes were the same, cold and calculating. She wouldn't even look at us. Her lawyer tried everything to get her out of trouble, saying she was stressed, misunderstood, even playing the victim, but the evidence was too strong. The judge wasn't fooled. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison for identity theft, fraud, and forgery. When the judge read the sentence, she finally looked at Lucas and said, "This is your fault." No apology, no regret, just blame. Lucas said nothing. He just watched as she was taken away in handcuffs. And that was the last time we ever saw her. You'd think that would be enough. She was in prison, she'd lost everything, but we had one more thing to do. While she was locked up, Lucas and I worked with a lawyer to make sure she would never have control over us again. We legally blocked her from touching our finances. We got a permanent restraining order so even if she got out, she could never come near us. And the best part? Lucas legally changed his last name. She couldn't even claim him as her son anymore. It was like cutting the last chain she tried to hold over him. He was free. After she went to prison, everything felt strange. No more surprise phone calls, no more guilt trips, no more harassment. For the first time in years, we were just living. Lucas's dad, finally free from her control, started traveling. He even found love again with a kind, amazing woman who treated us like real family. Lucas and I built a life of our own. No more looking over our shoulders, no more games, just peace. Years later, Lucas got a letter from a prison in another state. He didn't even have to open it to know who it was from. Without a second thought, he threw it into the fireplace and watched it burn. Then he smiled at me and said, "Some letters aren't worth reading." And that was the real end.